Buckle up because today's story is an absolute wild ride. We're diving deep into a film packed with twists that will keep you on the edge of your seat until the very last second. But before we unravel this masterpiece, I need a huge favor from you guys. Smash that like button, share this video with a friend who loves movies, and drop a comment below. I want to hear your thoughts on this one. Now, right into the action. Oh In-ju was first pushed into a corner by her superior, Director Shin. Despite his professional appearance, he harbored a disturbing obsession with people's feet. Seeing In-ju's discomfort, he slowly lowered his gaze and shamelessly knelt down to examine her cheap stockings, remarking that they couldn't hide the exquisite shape of her feet. Terrified that he might go further, In-ju froze, but before he could speak into her ear, he caught sight of something behind her. A single blue orchid caused him to recoil in fear and flee the room immediately. This wasn't even In-ju's home. It was the apartment of her only friend and colleague, Jin Hwa-young. In-ju was baffled as to why a mere flower would terrify a powerful man like a ghost. In-ju didn't realize that this was no ordinary flower. She recalled practicing yoga with Hwa-young and noticing a blue orchid tattoo on Hwa-young's ankle, accompanied by 4 mysterious numbers. She wondered what the numbers meant. Hwa-young had casually dismissed it as a memory of her mother. Though they were technically just colleagues, they had become inseparable best friends, largely because they were both outcasts at work. Labeled as the poor ones, the two dressed up to enjoy a meal at a high-end restaurant. However, the heel of In-ju's cheap shoes snapped. Although they weren't expensive, they were the only decent shoes she owned. Seeing In-ju's distress, Hwa-young took off her own luxury heels for In-ju to wear and draped her expensive coat over her shoulders. The moment In-ju stepped into the shoes, she was amazed by the comfort. Hwa-young calmly claimed she had saved up a year's salary to buy them for her birthday. When In-ju noticed the clothes were also designer labels, Hwa-young joked that they were fakes. Since they were both supposedly broke, In-ju didn't give it a second thought. However, while In-ju was playing the part of a wealthy woman at the restaurant, her shoes betrayed the truth. A woman in a red dress approached her in the restroom, noting that they were wearing the same limited edition heels, of which only 3 pairs existed in the country. In-ju realized then that luxury items act as a secret handshake in high society. She began to wonder how Hwa-young could truly afford them. During dinner, she asked Hwa-young about the rumors regarding her and Director Shin. Hwa-young denied any romantic involvement, and In-ju, frustrated on her friend's behalf, urged her to fight back against the gossip. Hwa-young remained indifferent, mentioning instead that she was setting up an international business and asked In-ju to sign some English documents. Trusting her friend implicitly, In-ju signed the thick stack of papers without reading them, unaware that this signature would change her life, and that this would be their final meeting. While Hwa-young was away on a business trip, In-ju visited her office to practice yoga, only to be interrupted by a stranger named Choi Do-il. He was a colleague who worked with Hwa-young in Europe. In-ju didn't realize the gravity of the situation until Do-il asked if she could contact Hwa-young, who was supposed to have returned to Korea 2 days prior. When In-ju went to Hwa-young's home to check on her, she found a horrific scene. Hwa-young was dead, hanging in her wardrobe. The police quickly ruled it a suicide and closed the case. But In-ju's nightmare was just beginning. Shortly after the funeral, In-ju received a pair of red high heels, the exact same pair Hwa-young wore when she died. Panicked, she confronted Director Shin, fearing she might be next. However, she soon discovered a final gift from her friend. Hwa-young had transferred her yoga club membership to In-ju. When In-ju opened Hwa-young's private locker at the club, she found a heavy hiking bag. Inside were the shoes In-ju had once worn and a letter from Hwa-young, thanking her for their friendship and expressing a wish for In-ju and her sisters to live in a bright apartment with windows. Beneath the letter lay 2 billion won in cash. As an accountant, In-ju knew the money was dirty. Director Shin eventually cornered her again, warning her that those who wear cheap shoes are bound to trip and fall. He demanded she help him find the slush fund of 70 billion won that Hwa-young had allegedly stolen from the company. In-ju was stunned. She couldn't reconcile the image of her friend with a thief of such a massive fortune, nor could she ignore the terrifying possibility that Hwa-young had been murdered for it. Terrified by the red high heels, Oh Inju rushed to find her superior, Director Shin, to demand the truth. She needed to know if he was the one who sent the shoes and if she was next on the death list, convinced that her friend Jin Wyoung's death was tied to him. However, Director Shin appeared even more frantic than her, claiming he was also being framed and was on his way to the prosecutor's office to reveal everything. In a horrifying turn of events, as Inju watched from the rooftop, Director Shin's car suddenly malfunctioned. Just before the car plummeted, he noticed a blue orchid inside, a sign that his fate was sealed. Inju witnessed the car dive off the 100-meter ledge, but instead of feeling relief, she was paralyzed with fear. She rushed downstairs to pull him from the wreckage and called for help, only to find another blue orchid at the scene, the ghost of Vietnam, a flower of death. This was the same flower she had seen at Wyoung's apartment, the one that had terrified Director Shin before. Meanwhile, the youngest sister, Oh In-hai, had been drawn into the orbit of the powerful Park family. The family's daughter, Hyo-rin, had taken a liking to In-hai, and her mother, Won Sanga, offered to sponsor In-hai's studies abroad. Unaware of the danger, In-hai accepted. One evening, Sanga led In-hai to a secret basement, a place she claimed was off-limits to others. When the lights flickered on, the room revealed a breathtaking yet eerie sight. A massive, rare, and poisonous blue orchid tree. Back at the hospital, Inju's world continued to unravel. Choi Duel informed her that Director Shin was dead and urged her not to escalate the situation. When Inju questioned if he had anticipated the accident, Duel revealed CCTV footage of Wyoung withdrawing the 2 billion won money that was still missing. He suspected Wyoung was murdered because of it. Though Inju tried to act natural, Duel, far sharper than she realized, had already noticed the large hiking bag she was carrying. Determined to protect her family, Inju confronted Won Sanga, refusing to let In-hai be treated like a servant and offering to pay for her sister's studies herself. However, her choice of footwear, the limited edition heels gifted by Wyoung, immediately alerted Sanga that Inju had access to unexpected wealth. Once Inju left, Sanga called her husband, Park Jae-sang, questioning where a woman like Inju could have suddenly found so much cash. Tragedy struck when In-hai, while painting a portrait of Sanga near the poisonous orchid tree, collapsed from a lack of oxygen. At the hospital, the doctors delivered a devastating diagnosis. In-hai suffered from a congenital heart condition that required an expensive surgery to save her life. Desperate, Inju went to retrieve the 2 billion won she had hidden. But before she could secure the money, she was cornered by members of the Park Jae-sang Foundation. They produced the CCTV photos of Wyoung with the money bag and pointed directly at the locker behind her, claiming the 2 billion won belonged to them. Just as Inju thought she could save her sister, Inju, cornered and left with no choice, offered to return the 2 billion won, but she pleaded for a loan of 100 million won to cover Oh In-hai's urgent heart surgery. Instead of mercy, a foundation staff member approached her with a sadistic offer. If Inju could endure 10 punches, she would lend her the money. Desperate to save her sister, Inju agreed. She was brutally beaten, knocked to the ground repeatedly, and kicked, the staff member treating the violence as a mere game. Choi Duel eventually intervened, warning the woman that such low-life methods would lead to her termination from the foundation. Just as things reached a breaking point, Won Sanga arrived. Playing the role of a compassionate benefactor, she scolded her staff for their cruelty and reminded them that Inju had returned the money and that her sister was Hyo-rin's dear friend. Grateful for Sanga's intervention in securing In-hai's surgery, Inju agreed to become Sanga's personal assistant. Inju now viewed this position as a calculated move to get closer to the family and find a way to turn her life around. On her first day, she witnessed Sanga's erratic and volatile temperament. Sanga flew into a frantic rage over a missing green silk coat, nearly ordering the servants to tear up the floorboards until Inju spotted the garment. In a heartbeat, Sanga shifted back into the persona of a poised, elegant noblewoman. She then abruptly left for Singapore, instructing Inju to stay at the estate overnight to care for Hyo-rin, who suffered from breathing difficulties during her father's frequent outbursts. That night, Park Jae-sang returned and flew into a rage upon finding his wife gone. Inju, feeling trapped in a house of monsters, confided in Duel, who told her that endurance was their only option for now. When Sanga returned from Singapore, a chilling confrontation unfolded with her husband. Jae-sang, suspecting her of infidelity, interrogated her about the trip. Sanga dropped her facade completely, taunting him by claiming she went to Singapore to spend money and flirt with healthy men, a direct jab at his pride. Jae-sang's reaction was terrifyingly controlled. Despite her calling him a servant and a beast, he calmly tore open her luggage, searching for evidence of her betrayal. As the parents fought, Hyo-rin sought refuge in In-hai's bed, trembling with fear. In-hai, who had once harbored a secret ambition to replace Hyo-rin and live her luxurious life, began to realize the girl's existence was a nightmare. In-hai recalled a conversation with Park Jae-sang where he admitted his own dark history. He told her that he was merely the son of a general's driver, but his ambition led him to steal small items from the general's house just to show he had the hunger to take what he wanted. He saw that same thieving ambition in In-hai. However, In-hai soon discovered the physical toll this house took on Hyo-rin, noting the scars on her wrists from past self-harm. To help Hyo-rin cope with her trauma, In-hai encouraged her to paint the things she feared the most, sharing that she used art to alleviate her own darkness. Hyo-rin took her tools and began to paint from the depths of her subconscious. Later, while In-ju was helping retrieve Hyo-rin's phone from under the bed, she moved a stack of these paintings aside. As she looked at the canvas, In-ju let out a blood-curdling scream. The image Hyo-rin had painted was a graphic, detailed depiction of Jin Hwa-young in her final moments, the red heels, the wardrobe, and the blue orchid, proving that the child had seen the secret horror behind her friend's suicide. Meanwhile, the power struggle between Sanga and her husband, Park Jae-sang, reached a new level of psychological warfare. Sanga attended a formal meeting with her husband, but her disdain for him was so palpable that she physically revolted at his presence, needing to retreat to the restroom to recover. In-ju, acting as her loyal assistant, followed her, even offering to trade clothes to help her save face. This gesture seemed to amuse Sanga, who later bought In-ju an expensive dress, claiming that kind-hearted people deserve good things. However, Sanga's kindness was a facade. While they were out shopping, Sanga suddenly noticed she was being followed by her husband's men. She ditched her car, hailed a taxi, and took In-ju to Hwa-young's old apartment. There, Sanga dropped a bombshell. She claimed that she and Hwa-young had been secret best friends for years. She showed In-ju photos of them dining together and even revealed that she was the one who had gifted Hwa-young those luxury red heels. Sanga asked In-ju to become her new confidant, but In-ju initially refused, fearing that Hwa-young's suicide was a direct result of working for the Park family. The situation changed when Choi Do-el brought In-ju staggering news. While tracking the 70 billion won Hwa-young had allegedly stolen, he discovered that numerous high-end assets in Singapore, including a luxury apartment and a vintage car, were registered under In-ju's name. It turned out that the English documents Hwa-young had asked In-ju to sign years ago were actually papers establishing a secret identity for In-ju in Singapore. Do-el explained that the 70 billion won had been deposited into 7 different Singaporean banks last month using In-ju's signature. To reclaim her life and the money, In-ju realized she had to go to Singapore. Do-el advised her to play along with Sanga to get assigned to the upcoming international orchid auction in Singapore, a job Hwa-young used to handle. Back at the estate, the atmosphere grew increasingly suffocating. In-ju witnessed Sanga's legs covered in self-inflicted scratches and felt a momentary pang of sympathy, but Do-el warned her that Sanga was simply manipulating her trust to make her a willing pawn. True to his prediction, Sanga eventually asked In-ju to travel to Singapore on her behalf, using the excuse that she needed to stay home to care for her ailing father. Inside the house, Park Jae-sang's frustration boiled over. He attempted to play the doting husband, but Sanga repulsed him, even stripping off her clothes to show her scars as a way to mock his love. As they argued, the young Hyo-rin huddled in fear, once again hearing her mother's screams. In-hai, watching this dysfunctional family, realized the sickness in the house went deeper than she imagined. When Jae-sang later told the girls that Sanga was ill and confined to her room, In-hai knew it was a lie. She convinced Hyo-rin to sneak out to investigate. Inju, still haunted by Hyorin's painting, confronted the young girl one last time. Where did you see this scene? How did you know about the red shoes? But Hyorin looked at her with genuine confusion, unable to remember where the vision had come from. Oh Inhai and Oh Inju scrambled to check the estate's security footage, only to find the young girl sitting motionless in a car in the parking lot. When they reached her, they found her in a trance-like state, her phone playing dashcam footage from the 17th of the previous month, the day Jin Wayang died. The recording clearly showed their father, Park Jae-sang, visiting Wayang's apartment. Hyorin tearfully recalled that on that day, she heard her parents in a violent argument before her father stormed out without even a glance at her, followed shortly by her mother. Inhai asked if Hyorin had followed them and seen Wayang's death, but Hyorin claimed the horrific image had lived in her mind long before that night. The girls realized the connection. The scent of the blue orchid from the secret room acted as a hallucinogen. To uncover the source of the trauma, Inhai led Hyorin back to the orchid room and taught her to relax her mind and follow the visions. Hyorin's memory took her to a dark, hidden attic where she spent time as a child. Though one Sanga had previously warned them that the area was strictly off-limits, the girls snuck back into the attic while Sanga was confined to her room. Amidst old boxes and mutilated photo albums where every face had been cut out, they made a bone-chilling discovery: a miniature dollhouse model depicting a woman in red heels hanging in a wardrobe. Hyorin had played with this toy as a child, subconsciously imprinting the image of death into her mind years before Wayang's tragedy occurred. This revelation convinced Hyorin that her father was a monster. Fearing for her mother's life, Hyorin snuck into Sanga's room at night to rescue her. To her surprise, Sanga seemed perfectly fine, calmly telling her daughter that she and Jae-sang had reconciled. However, Inhai, watching from the shadows, felt something was deeply wrong. She observed Sanga's ritual of standing by the window and deeply inhaling the scent of a blue orchid, a flower said to steal the soul of those who breathe it for too long. Jae-sang, though maintaining a facade of a devoted husband, kept her under lock and key, urging her to act like the mother of the nation for an upcoming public live stream to aid his political career. Sanga toyed with him, asking mockingly if she should wear something revealing, while both hid their true, murderous intentions. Seizing a moment of chaos, Sanga managed to slip a note to Inhai. The message was for Inju. Sanga claimed her husband was holding her captive and formally authorized Inju to go to Singapore alone to represent her at the International Orchid Auction. Inju was thrilled, seeing this as her chance to finally secure the 70 billion won. Unbeknownst to her, Jae-sang had already ordered Choi Do-il to accompany Inju to Singapore and eliminate her once the money was recovered. On the day of the live stream, Jae-sang was humiliated when Hyorin appeared on camera instead of Sanga. He realized too late that his wife had used their daughter as a distraction to escape. While Jae-sang panicked, realizing Sanga was likely headed to Singapore to enact her own scheme, Inju had already arrived in the city. She was checked into a luxury hotel, but when she presented her passport at the front desk, the staff grew visibly tense. As the employees whispered urgently and looked at her with expressions of shock and uncertainty, Inju's anxiety spiked. Using a translation app to bridge the language gap, in Singapore, Oh Inju was not a stranger. She was a legendary socialite everyone had been expecting. Soon, a management-level employee arrived, and while Oh Inju couldn't understand everything being said, their attitude was exceptionally respectful. She was escorted to a magnificent presidential suite where the staff even provided luxury shoes for her to change into, offering to fulfill any private request she might have. This level of service would later prove to be a crucial advantage for Inju at a critical moment. Later, Inju met with Choi Do-il at a restaurant, where things took a surreal turn. A waiter looked at her in confusion, asking if she was playing a prank. He claimed she had just finished a cup of coffee and left moments ago, questioning why she had changed her clothes just to come back for another drink. The mystery deepened as Do-il's investigation led them to a high-end apartment complex registered in Inju's name. As they walked through the grounds, residents and staff seemed to recognize her, greeting her warmly. When a cleaning lady called her by name, Inju began to spiral. How did these strangers know exactly who she was? They reached the apartment, but Inju found that Jin Wayang's old password didn't work. After several failed attempts, they drew the attention of a security guard. To her shock, the guard bowed politely and said, "Hello, Ms. O. Is there a problem?" Duel quickly improvised an excuse to get them away, but as they left, the guards whispered to each other about how Ms. O seemed different from the woman they had seen that morning. Inju was now convinced that someone with her exact face was wandering Singapore. She wondered if Wayang had undergone plastic surgery to look like her, but Duil dismissed this, reminding her that Wayang was dead. Despite the confusion, Inju had to fulfill one Sanga's instructions at the International Orchid Auction. She found that the elite attendees there also recognized her. Following Sanga's orders to win at any cost, Inju aggressively outbid the competition, eventually securing the rare orchid for $600,000. As she became the center of attention, she overheard a foreigner remarking in confusion that they had just seen her in the restroom wearing a yellow dress. This final piece of evidence solidified a shocking hope in Inju's mind. There was a very real possibility that Jean Wayang was still alive. Choi Duel pulled her aside, urging her to stay calm and focus on the immediate priority, withdrawing the 70 billion won registered in her name. Regaining her composure, Inju visited 6 different banks to empty the accounts Wayang had left for her. During the process, she received a warning from her sister, Oh In-kyung, to be wary of Duil, as Oh In-hai had overheard that Park Jae-sang placed him by her side for a sinister purpose. Though Inju kept this in mind, she didn't confront him immediately. As they headed to the 7th and final bank, Inju's anxiety peaked. She bluntly asked Duil if he intended to kill her once the money was secured. In response, Duil handed her his own handgun, loaded it, and taught her how to use it. This gesture left Inju confused. She began to wonder if her sisters had misjudged him, as he didn't seem like the type to betray her. However, upon entering the final bank, an elderly woman bumped into her and slipped her a note. Looking outside, Inju caught a glimpse of someone who sounded exactly like Wayang. The note warned her that Duil was dangerous and instructed her to meet at the apartment. Taking advantage of a mandatory photo session at the bank, Inju executed a plan to lose Duil. She fled in a waiting car intended to take her to the apartment. Her escape was nearly thwarted when a truck deliberately rammed into her vehicle, but she survived the crash and hurried to the apartment, desperate to ask Wayang why she had faked her death and involved her in this 70 billion won scheme. Inside, Inju found a glass of juice and, parched from the ordeal, drank it, unaware it was laced with the hallucinogenic blue orchid extract. To her horror, the person who walked through the door wasn't Wayang, but one Sanga. The mask fell as Sanga revealed that she had handpicked Inju to be the protagonist of her twisted play from the very start because of the desperation for wealth in her eyes. She admitted that Wayang had also been a character she cast, the outcast, whose death was meant to look like a suicide. Sanga callously detailed her plan. The news would report that a vain Korean woman committed orchid fraud, was robbed by a man, and jumped to her death. She even mocked that she had prepared the funeral outfit for Inju. While Inju struggled against the effects of the orchid juice, Sanga assured her that In-hai would be safe as part of the family as long as Hyorin remained attached to her. Unbeknownst to them, In-hai and Hyorin were at that moment uncovering the truth back in Korea. They viewed security footage from the day Wayang died, noticing Sanga left wearing a fur coat but returned without it, looking disturbingly gleeful. They realized the miniature model in the attic, a woman in a fur coat, was a direct representation of Wayang's murder. Back in Singapore, as Inju's vision blurred, Sanga gloated that when Inju next opened her eyes, she would be facing the Grim Reaper. Inju made a final request to see the 70 billion won. When Sanga opened the suitcases, she was stunned to find they were filled with bricks. In that moment of distraction, Inju pulled out the gun she had hidden. Before she could act, Sanga's men swarmed the room, but Choi Duel burst in to intervene. He used a remote call from Park Jae-sang to force Sanga to stop. Jae-sang warned his wife that if she didn't cease her games, she would lose her fortune and face life in prison, as In-kyung was threatening to expose the family's secret ledgers. Furious, Sanga backed down. Later, after a night of turmoil, Sanga woke to find that Hyorin had disappeared. Her housekeepers informed her that Ms. Oh, Inju, had been waiting for her for a long time. Sanga, internally cursing her husband for being unable to control a poor girl like Inju, composed herself to meet her. Inju, though shaken by her near-death experience the day before, stood her ground and asked one Sanga directly if Park Hyo-rin had disappeared. Sanga immediately suspected Inju of kidnapping her daughter as an act of revenge, but Inju told her to watch her mouth. Inju then produced a letter she had found in Oh In-hai's room. As Sanga recognized her daughter's handwriting, a sense of dread washed over her. In the letter, Hyo-rin told her mother that she wanted to live her own life and no longer wished to be a greenhouse flower, fearing that she would never survive the real world if she stayed. Hyo-rin and In-hai had decided to venture out into the world together. For a fleeting moment, Sanga seemed moved. Her daughter had never left her side before, but she quickly dismissed the emotion. She told Inju that Hyo-rin wouldn't last a month before coming home. As a parting favor for delivering the letter, Sanga warned Inju that Choi Do-il was a fraud and urged her to take her sisters and the 70 billion won abroad as quickly as possible. Inju kept a calm face, but she silently noted Sanga's words. Meanwhile, the middle sister, Oh In-kyung, was busy hunting for an exclusive scoop. She tracked down Sanga's brother, Won Sang-woo, who had been secretly confined to a psychiatric hospital for 4 years. In-kyung managed to sneak into his high-security room through a vent. It became clear through their conversation that Sang-woo was not mentally ill. He had been imprisoned by his own sister. In-kyung proposed a deal. She would help him escape if he provided evidence to expose Sanga and Park Jae-sang. They managed to escape through a small opening, but Sang-woo had his own hidden agenda. When Jae-sang learned that his brother-in-law had been taken, he was furious with his men, fearing Sanga's reaction. Soon after, he received a phone call from Sang-woo himself. Sang-woo claimed he never intended to leave the hospital and was only forced by the reporter. He told Jae-sang that he just wanted to leave the country quietly and asked for money and a fake ID to start a new life. Seeing an opportunity to get rid of him, Jae-sang agreed to meet. However, at the meeting, Sang-woo pulled a gun on him. Despite the threat, Jae-sang showed no fear and eventually overpowered him, realizing the gun wasn't even loaded. Jae-sang's true nature took over. He began to brutally beat Sang-woo with a rock, mocking him for leaving the hospital and confirming that he intended to kill him the moment he stepped out those doors. Jae-sang, blinded by bloodlust, finished the deed. Back at home, Sanga comforted her husband as he leaned against her, exhausted from the murder. She praised him for doing what was necessary for the greater goal. While sipping fine wine and preparing a bath, she played the part of the supportive wife, though it was clear she was simply keeping him focused on the mission. Jae-sang continued to meticulously maintain his public image as a mayoral candidate, using disinfectant to scrub himself clean of the filth of the common people the moment he entered his car. He didn't care about politics, he was only doing it to satisfy Sanga's ambitions. With only 3 days left until the election, Jae-sang was busy with TV broadcasts to win over voters. However, he was blindsided when In-kyung appeared at the station with an old witness to expose a murder committed by Jae-sang's father 20 years ago. Watching from home, Sanga knew her husband was in trouble. Jae-sang tried to remain calm and counterattacked by questioning In-kyung's sobriety and accusing her of manipulating his father's history to ruin his election. Inju and In-kyung remained silent, knowing that the appetizer was over and it was time for the main course. During Jae-sang's grand campaign rally, where he claimed his family was beyond reproach, In-kyung released the final blow. The giant screens behind Jae-sang suddenly played a high-definition video of him holding a gun, the footage from 2 days prior when he murdered Sang-woo. The crowd went silent. Jae-sang's heart skipped a beat as he saw his own face on the screen. He desperately tried to claim the video was a deep fake or a fabrication by haters, but the footage continued, showing him repeatedly striking Sang-woo with a rock. Despite the undeniable evidence, Jae-sang made one last frantic plea for the public to believe his lies over their own eyes. After the scandal broke, Park Jae-sang and Won Sang-ah watched the news coverage of the election. To his surprise, despite the video leak, he remained first in the polls. His staff was ecstatic, and he let out a long sigh of relief, thinking he had survived the storm. However, Sanga approached him with a plate of sliced apples. a signal he understood all too well. Seeing a blue orchid on the plate, a bitter smile crossed his face. He knew his time was up and that he had to sacrifice himself to protect Sanga and her father's legacy. With eerie calmness, he said his final goodbye. Sang callously told him to wait a moment until she finished her apple. To protect the family from being implicated in the murders, she chose to sacrifice her husband, and Jae Sang went to his death willingly. He walked to the rooftop and leaped, ending his mission. At the funeral, Sanga put on a show of heartbreaking grief, though her tears were forced. As the daughter of the general, she had always felt her marriage to the son of a driver was a condescension. Even in death, Jae Sang never truly won her love. The moment she returned home, she excitedly told her secretary that it was time to play with that poor girl, referring to Oh In-ju. Meanwhile, In-ju checked her bank balance. The 70 billion won, approximately $50 million, had vanished. She tried to call Choi Do-il, but his phone was off. Panic set in as her balance hit zero. Suddenly, the police arrived at her door. She managed to call her sister, Oh In-kyung, crying that Dul had betrayed her and stolen everything. In prison, In-kyung secured a lawyer for In-ju. The news was grim. In-ju faced 20 years for embezzlement and fraud. In-ju protested that she only used a small amount for ice cream and basic necessities and had returned the initial 2 billion won, but the lawyer insisted the evidence of her contact with the 70 billion won was undeniable. Meanwhile, Sanga moved forward with her grand plan, recruiting an old comrade of her father's, General Jang, to take over her husband's company and rename it the Jongran Society, fulfilling her father's dream. She asked the general for one favor: clear the pebbles from her path, meaning the Oh sisters. General Jang's men kidnapped In-kyung, but as the general prepared to eliminate her for the sake of the general's legacy, In-kyung gambled. She revealed to the old soldier that Sanga was so insane she had even murdered her own brother, the general's son. Moved by this betrayal of the general's bloodline, Jang changed sides. Back in court, In-ju was shocked to see Choi Do-il take the witness stand. She expected him to finish her off, but he pivoted unexpectedly. He testified that although the money was in In-ju's account, she had asked him to return it once she realized it was illegal. He revealed that a certain person had actually ordered him to transfer the funds to a bank in Panama, an account owned by one Sanga herself. Sanga was stunned by Do-il's betrayal, but the final blow came when she saw In-kyung appearing on a live news broadcast alongside General Jang. Together, they exposed Sanga's crimes and the Orchid Room secret society. In court, In-ju gave a moving final statement, admitting her greed but begging for justice for her friend, Jin Hwa-young. Just as the proceedings reached their peak, the back doors opened. Everyone, including a horrified Sanga, froze. Jin Hwa-young, the woman they all thought was dead, walked into the courtroom alive. As she stood before the judge, Hwa-young revealed she had been a pawn in Sanga's play, but had executed her own counterscheme, leaving everyone wondering. If Hwa-young is alive, whose body was in the wardrobe? Hwa-young stated it was irrelevant to the current case but promised to reveal the truth later. Based on her testimony, the court immediately acquitted In-ju. Upon leaving the courthouse, Sanga was swarmed by reporters. Despite her calm facade, she could already sense her downfall. Returning home, she extracted the essence of the blue orchid. In the hospital, her father began to struggle for breath. Sanga remained eerily composed. She then approached Jang and injected him with the lethal blue orchid extract, leaving him to die on the floor. She callously told the nurse her father was fine and had simply had a drink. By now, Sanga had completely lost her grip on reality and was prepared for a final, violent stand. Hwa-young later explained the truth to a furious In-ju. She had initially planned to let In-ju experience the life of a wealthy woman as a lead actress in a play, but she hadn't anticipated Sanga's murderous intent. The woman who died in the wardrobe was actually a person who looked remarkably like Hwa-young and had undergone plastic surgery to mimic her style. Sanga had mistaken her for Hwa-young and murdered her. In-ju was outraged that Hwa-young had stayed hidden while In-ju nearly died investigating her death. Hwa-young revealed she had tried to protect In-ju from the shadows. It was Hwa-young who had used her car to buffer the truck that rammed In-ju's vehicle in Singapore. She had been in a coma following that crash, only to wake up and realize that even Park Jae-sang had been trying to prevent his wife's reckless, stupid games. The confrontation reached its peak when Sanga kidnapped Hwa-young and lured In-ju into her secret garden. Sanga revealed a horrific trap. The automated sprinklers above the orchid tree were filled with highly concentrated hydrochloric acid. Hwa-young was tied directly beneath them. Sanga gave In-ju two choices: watch her friend be dissolved into a pile of flesh within 3 minutes or watch her die trying to save her. To buy time for the police she had called, In-ju confronted Sanga with the truth of her past. At 15, Sanga had accidentally pushed her mother during an argument, causing a fatal head injury. Her mother's final words were to hide the truth from the general. That night, Sanga found her mother hanging in the wardrobe, a trauma that twisted her mind into a cycle of repetitive, theatrical murders. As the general lay dying in the hospital, he shed a single tear, remembering how the blue orchid had once saved his life when he and his comrades were starving and lost in the mountains. The very flower that gave him the power to defeat his enemies eventually became the instrument of his death at his daughter's hands. Back in the garden, Sanga pressed the button, and the acid rained down. Amidst Hwa-young's screams, In-ju spotted a heavy iron manhole cover. She used a grenade to blast it loose, then held the lid over her head as a shield against the acid to reach Hwa-young and cut her ropes. Frustrated that she hadn't seen her masterpiece of gore, Sanga lunged at In-ju. In the ensuing struggle, In-ju pushed Sanga into the pool of hydrochloric acid. Within moments, Sanga was gone, and as she died, the blue orchids on the tree withered and fell. Though Hwa-young survived, she still had to face the legal consequences for her financial crimes. The two women remained bonded by their shared scars, both physical and emotional, while In-ju, after everything, found herself back in the humble life she had once tried so hard to escape. Alright, that's a wrap, my friend. Make sure to smash that like button and drop a comment from the heart. If you're really feeling the love, share this video with your crew. And yo, check out the channel. I've got tons of videos you're going to vibe with. Catch you in the next one.